critical thinkers, public speakers, and they debate.
We have doctors, we have nurses and midwives. But you're the one who read the article and said that yes.
Introducing I Debate TV Championship, where the best schools in Rwanda battle against each other, resolving conflicts without resorting to violence, solving problems creatively using debate. This is I Debate TV Championship.
Thank you and welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. This is the I Debate TV Championship, another episode of the quarterfinals where we have only one team that is proceeding to the semi-finals, and we can't wait to see this one. Our motion for today is this house regrets foreign aid to African countries. Quite a debatable one. My name is David and I'm always your host. The proposition side is Mother Mary International School Complex. They are taking on the opposition from Riviera Highschool. Our beautiful panel of judges is comprised of Blandine Kungwa, Liz Giramata, and the only soul man in the panel is Joselito Wahu. Judge Joselito, who is seated among two women, how do you feel, first of all?
Well, I feel really great. It's a great pleasure to be here with these beautiful ladies beside me, as I look forward to hearing both sides at the debate, and I hope it'll be great.
Well, I do hope that the beautiful faces on his side will not inflict his judgment. But hey, we shall see. Now, my job here is done. I shall return here when these two sides have presented their arguments and are ready to know who won. Let the battle of the minds commence.
Okay, so we can start with the first speaker from the proposition side.
So, good afternoon, everyone. The motion of today's debate reads, this House regrets foreign aid to African countries. So I'm in the proposition side. My name is Cassandra, alongside Davin, a second speaker, and Leslie as the third speaker. So I'll first start by defining the keywords. So regret, that means we're disappointed by the outcomes of foreign aid to African countries. Then foreign aid, this assistance from the UN, the DAC, and China. And this aid includes, please note judges, this is a boundary I'm setting, economic aid. And African countries, well, the 54 sovereign states in Africa. So we'll be looking at how the positive effects do not outweigh the negative effects. And the positive impacts are short-term, while the negative impacts are long-term. Okay, moving on. We'll be looking at huge debts, failed projects, capital flight, dependency, and misallocation of resources. So, as we all know, although they say foreign aid is given in the name of cooperation and friendship, like the Chinese president said it better, I quote, solving African issues the African way, whatever that means, it comes with strings attached. And like John Adams said it even better, there are two ways to conquer and enslave a country. One is by sword, the other is by debt, which is why China holds now 20% of Africa's debt. So coming back to the strings attached. So China has done amazing things for Africa. They've built mines, they've built ports, they've built the railways, heck, they've even lent money. But China had also done the same thing for Sri Lanka. But guess what? When Sri Lanka wasn't able to pay back their debt, China took control of their port and is now seized by a Chinese state-owned company for 99 years. So there's also the fact that there have been reports of local workers being abused and harassed. This has happened in Zambia, in Nigeria, and even in Kenya. And there's also the risk of the Ugandan International Airport in Entebbe being seized by Chinese Import-Export Bank because they weren't able to pay back their loan. And we need to worry because China has poured over $300 billion in helping improve Africa's infrastructure. If we're not able to pay back these debts, we'll end up being like Sri Lanka. All our infrastructure will be taken by these Chinese-owned state companies and the Chinese government. So at the end of the day, we're losing, which is why we regret foreign aid. Okay, moving on. There's dependency. Well, Rwanda's sovereign wealth fund, Agaciro Development Fund. This is an example of how African countries are trying to remove these chains, I'd say, of slavery. Slavery, they call this foreign aid, but this is a form of colonialism. Just, they called it a new name. Anyway, so there's proof that Somalia received over $55 billion from 1991 till this day, and it remains one of the poorest countries in the world. So Somalia has been dependent on foreign aid since its independence in 1960. And this has brought problems like violent rivalry for control over large-scale food aid. And this fueled corruption and incapacitated Somalia's economy. And if the foreign aid was really working, wouldn't Somalia be one of the world's richest countries? But no, they're still the poorest country. And foreign aid, please note, will only ever produce maximum results as long as it is linked to maximum self-dependency. As long as countries take control of their economy and use foreign aid as something that isn't their source of income, their source for growth of economy, then foreign countries, African countries will experience an increase in their economic growth. But as long as we aren't self-dependent on ourselves, on our nation, then we're done. I mean, we're better off just being Chinese property or foreign property, like. Okay, and the former Tanzanian president Benjamin Mkapa said that development aid has taken deep root to the psyche of the people, especially in poorer countries of the South. It is similar to drug addiction. It really is, because we take foreign aid as something that we need. Okay, thank you.
Dear Speaker, I have a question for you. You talked about Agaciro Development Fund, and you said that's one of the solutions, or how the nations are trying to go against maybe the problems that we're talking about, right? And actually your main argument is about how you're saying that the positive impacts are short-term and the negative impacts are long-term. But don't you think that the negative are short-term?
Foreign aid isn't helping our economy grow. This was a starting point. It wasn't something that was supposed to be continuous. It was supposed to help us like it helped Europe after World War II. Now they're dependent on their own economy. They're not using foreign aid from America like they did before. Thank you.
Now we can welcome the first speaker from the opposition side.
A very good afternoon to everyone. My name is Agyozo Queen as the first speaker from the opposition side, with Ora Gracia as the second speaker and Yvonne as our third speaker. So as today we're having a motion that states that this House regrets foreign aid to African countries. So without going any further, I'd like to highlight on the definition that we didn't agree on our side, where on the foreign aid, we define foreign aid as any international transfer of capital, goods, or services from a country to another for the benefit of the recipient country. So I'd like you all to think about this. Why do people think that aid is inefficient? The answer is very simple. The first one is that the success of these financial aids that are provided is rarely talked about out loud. And the other answer is the simplest reason that people are misinformed. So a survey was made by the company called One in UK Streets, and the question was, how much do you think the UK spends on foreign aid? So most of them answered that it is about 10 to 20% of its gross income. And to their surprise, they got to be informed that it is 0.7%. And the other question was, how many people do you think were saved by the vaccinations since the past 10 years? And then most of them answered 20 up to 15,000 people that were saved. But then it was a shock to hear that it is 5.4 million people who were saved over the last 10 years. So this takes us to the debate of today. Why are we debating about this? Why should we actually regret that there has been this foreign aid that has been provided to African countries? So a regret is something that you have done, but then it didn't reach its aim. And here we're seeing that mostly foreign aid that is provided, one, it is for the reduction of poverty rates in Africa and the improvement of wealth. So let's take a look on Ethiopia. This is the country that has the highest financial aid rate, and it has received more than 99 million US dollars according to worldbank.org. And since then, it has been having a reduction rate in poverty from 44 up to 24% currently. And in addition, we also have Rwanda, which has been getting COVID-19 vaccines, whereby since 2K21, whereby we had 10,000 cases weekly, it has been reduced up to 15 cases every day, whereby we're seeing that there's been a great decrease because of these foreign aids that we've been receiving through foreign aid. And this is according to COVID-19.who.int. So going straight to the refutation, so they talked about that there is short-term effects of positive effects, and then there is long-term. And they talked about strings attached. But then I have a question to ask them. If you get a loan from any other country and then you don't pay that loan, what do you expect that that bank is going to do? So that means that if they're given those loans, then it means that sometimes they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And then it's not up to us to regret that the loans have been given because they've been not being used for what they've been meant to be used for. And another thing they talked about that we are seeing also evidence of how this aid has been helping us. And in addition to that, we've seen that you've also talked about corruption in Somalia since 1960s. And we've seen that that corruption is the one that is causing every problem. And in addition to that, you've talked about that foreign aid is something that must stop. And then you're saying that it has been going on and on, but then foreign aid is given because the need is there. So why would they have not continue to give it if it's really needed in African countries? So with this, I rest my case.
The question that I have for you today is, as my first speaker talked about, she defined regret as something that we're disappointed over, and you're clearly stating that you think that we said that it's something that should definitely stop. We defined that that we're disappointed at the way foreign aid is being used within countries, and also you are talking about the humanitarian aid, but my first speaker clearly stated that we are putting a boundary to the economic aid and not humanitarian aid. Yeah.
Okay, so for your first question that you were asking about how it's a regret over something that has happened, but then at the same time, a regret is something that has occurred, and then you feel as a loss of something. But then we're seeing that in the aims of foreign aid, most of them are being achieved. But the problem is that it's not being known to people.
So you said that Somalia was corrupt, even in the 1960s. Well, we can't delink foreign aid to corruption, since the government of Somalia becomes less dependent on its own nation and becomes more dependent on foreign aid. And foreign aid, remember, is free money. So they don't really get the struggle of earning that money. So they'll spend it, hey, I'm not even working to earn it.
The thing is, you're the one firstly who talked about corruption, and the other thing is that if there is foreign aid, you're limiting foreign aid as something that can't be paid, but foreign aid can be even in form of loans. So you're ignoring that. So if you know that you have to pay for that loan, still you can use it. And in addition to that, we've seen that foreign aid is like a foundation that is being used by countries to get independent in the end.
I now give the floor to the second speaker from the proposition side.
Good afternoon, judges in the House at large. My name is Davin, and I'm the second speaker from the side proposition. Just to begin from what the current speaker said, she talked about how foreign aid is a foundation for African countries to build on from there, and that is what exactly my first speaker said. Foreign aid is just a foundation and not a source of income for African countries. She also talked about how foreign aid, she talked about corruption, and our first speaker didn't actually talk about corruption, but since you brought it up, let us build on from there. Now, if foreign aid was not there in the first place, or if it was not being given in excess, this corruption could not be there. Let me give us a quick case study of a country like Uganda. A country like Uganda, because she receives a lot of foreign aid, 690 billion shillings of the Ugandan revenue go into public administration. This public administration has 70 cabinet ministers. It has 80 president advisors who actually never get to see the president physically. It has 353 members of parliament, and just 18 billion of this government revenue, which is due to the excess foreign aid, goes into agriculture, which 30% of the Ugandan citizens are struck by poverty and are in the agriculture sector. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what comes to your mind when you think of Africa? When you think of Africa, the first thing that comes into your mind is famine, poverty, a nation that has malnourished children with, with flies around their faces. And the image of Africa became too bad that The Economist in 2010 labeled Africa as the hopeless continent, or the heart of darkness. Now, what is actually taking place? For those that studied history, in secondary, in senior 2, we know the scramble and partition of Africa that happened in the 19th century. So what is actually happening right now is global powers rushing into Africa in the same race for colonies and name it, whatever you can name it. And this is China, Canada, the EU, and so on. And one country is clearly emerging the winner, and that is China. That is why each and everything that is happening in Africa is governed by China. Now, what is foreign aid actually doing to the African continent? My first speaker talked about dependency. He who pays the piper will always call the tune. But that was covered by my first speaker. We look at failed projects. According to reliefweb.int, Africa is the only continent in the world where official aid inflow outstrips capital inflow. Now, several other studies will show that foreign aid has failed to deliver sustainable economic growth and poverty reduction to the African continent. Why? This is because this so-called free money is poured into white elephant projects, which in the long run do not deliver this sustainable growth to the African continent. When you look at the Kenya-Uganda Railway, this was a so ambitious project that started by the Chinese government, and ambitious it was that it was created between two national parks. This was going to destroy the ecosystem of those wildlife, and we get to see these workers getting mistreated and so on. We look at the Lesotho Highlands water projects. This was a 3.5 billion project that was funded by the states, but along the way it was cut off because the electricity that was being provided was too expensive for the people to afford. So we see these so much ambitious projects which international donors come and say, we are giving you foreign aid in the rush of getting, I will call them colonies, in Africa. When we look at something called capital flight, for those that know capital flight, this is a situation where a lot of resources and money is running out of a country due to an economic consequence. Now, what is this capital flight? A Chinese industry will be set up for a country like DRC Congo that has over 20 mines being governed by the Chinese government. The Chinese government will think of this project, will work on it, will construct it, and so on. So what is actually happening? The Chinese have the topmost positions in this mine, and then they're employing their workers in the top positions, and Africans are just put in as no more workers. The profit is being taken back to China, and they're actually the ones that are earning more, and we are manipulated to think that they are actually providing employment, yet in actual sense they are not. So ladies and gentlemen, foreign aid is just that boy around the corner with a bouquet of flowers, but be careful of the flowers that you see outside. They have thorns and they will prick. And once Africa cannot realize that she has to depend on her domestic economy and use it to improve herself, we are always going to be reliant on this foreign aid, which in the long run shall not be efficient. What's a colony? I think a colony is a country or anything that a superpower comes and takes over. Economically, when you look at the scramble and partition of Africa, Africans were manipulated to think that they were sending raw materials and they were being provided for clothes, but these clothes instead came back and they were more expensive for the Africans too.
China is politically leading DRC, right?
No.
China each and everything is being governed by China in Africa, right?
Yeah.
So China is taking decisions in the parliament, in the Senate.
China, by her taking over the industries, which is the most valuable thing in DRC Congo, will give it a platform to start from taking over DRC as a colony if she wants to.
So it's your opinion and an assumption, right?
It's an opinion. And
Thank
it can
you.
be put into practice if they want to.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, now you can welcome the second speaker from the opposition side.
This House regrets foreign aid to African countries. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the second speaker from side opposition. First of all, I want to quote this. When a disaster strikes such as tsunami, the earthquake, volcanic eruption, all that, name it, no matter how rich or poor a disaster-stricken country is, foreign aid is always welcome. I need to emphasize on how normally Africa receives foreign aid because of need that there is disaster, and need that there is war. They talked about Somalia, and Somalia is one of the countries which always have war because of Islamic states, all that. So how do you expect such a country to stop receiving aid or to develop? But you have the statistics of Ethiopia showing that Ethiopia receives is one of the countries in Africa that receives the biggest aid, and it actually apparently it's poverty rate is 24% from 40% in 1980. This shows that foreign aid has done a lot. Let me go back straight to the point. They talked about positive effects and negative effects of foreign aid. And they said that they want to prove that the negative effects are long-term. And I'm here to prove that the positive effects are long-term in these ways. I want to give an example of what you call the Guinea worms, right? They were there and they were eradicated by NGOs. One of them being Carter Center, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and these foundations have led international campaign to eradicate Guinea worms. Guinea worms, in 1988, the cases were 3.5 million, and now, in 2021, there were 15 cases. Now, let's go back to the point. I want to quote Mahatma Gandhi, one of the wise men, who said that it is health that is the real wealth, and not pieces of gold and silver. You get the point? So what can we do without health? Do you remember the time when COVID-19 struck Rwanda and everything was closed? Do you remember that time? That's the time when everyone knew that health is the first thing to deal with. So how can you regret on this earth something that is saving lives, something that is helping people to come out of disaster, something that is reducing poverty on a rate that is visible? Let's not talk about Somalia, where there is war every day. Let's talk about countries like Ethiopia, which are developing. Let's talk about Rwanda. How could Rwanda have survived after the 1994 genocide if there wasn't the foreign aid? Another thing is about foreign aid. How are they defining the foreign aid? Talking about that foreign aid is the money that is got from UN and China. That's what the first speaker said. But that's not the definition. Foreign aid is the money. Actually, it can be in various forms. It can be physical goods, skills and technological know-how, financial grants, and concessional loans. So these are various forms of foreign aid. And there are actually two types of foreign aid. There is project foreign aid and program foreign aid. Actually, they're basing on project foreign aid, but you also have the program foreign aid, which is given to countries. So they're threatening us that maybe Uganda will lose its airport in I don't know how many years. They're estimating that, but that's not the case. Let's talk about the good things that we're seeing. Let's talk about those numbers of kids who are being saved. Let's talk about what you call breaking the poverty cycle in a family. When people get aid, sometimes people get scholarships, right? Bright kids get scholarship. And when they get that good education, it helps them to break the poverty cycle in their families. They go, they get a great job, and then the poverty cycle in the family breaks down. So that's long-lasting, right? It's not short-term, it's long-lasting. Actually, the negative impacts are the ones which are short-term, as talked about the Agricultural Development Fund. After Rwanda has realized that maybe most of its people are in the working age, and they can be able to have Agricultural Development Fund, therefore, they can start something on their own, which will help them to stop their dependence on the foreign aid. That's what shows that those things are short-term, but then what's long-term is the positive impact, breaking the poverty cycle. Thank you very much. I rest my case.
I have a question for you. You said foreign aid is a long-term goal, right?
Negative impacts which are long-term.
Okay, so a simple question. What if this foreign aid cut off? What would you as a country do?
Exactly. France stopped the foreign aid and then Rwanda started the Agricultural Development Fund. That's how solutions are made because we don't want to depend on it. But countries like Somalia, which are always in war, then they're always getting foreign aid. And one of the sources is UN.
You also agree that we are not supposed to depend on the foreign aid?
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yes, we're not supposed to depend on the foreign aid, but foreign aid is there to help. As I said, if there is a disaster, if there is war, it's always welcome. Why do you think that we're receiving doses of vaccines? Because we need our health, right? And every country has been receiving this in Africa. And that's why we're back to almost our normal lives.
So you also believe that it is just a foundation for other countries to develop?
Not necessarily a foundation.
That's what you just said.
It's a push, right? Economic
for other
push.
countries to develop other solutions
for
for
poor
themselves.
countries to develop.
Thank you.
Thank you. I rest my case.
Now we can welcome the third speaker from the proposition side.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here as the third speaker of the proposition side, and the motion of today was this House regrets foreign aid to African countries. As the opposition side has said, the first thing that I wanted to make clear today is that we talked about the boundaries. Today we set our boundaries to the economic aid, and they kept talking about all the health, all the vaccines and everything, all the diseases that are eradicated. But the fact is that you didn't listen clearly to what we had to say to actually understand that we set a boundary to those economic aid. And another thing that they were talking about, they actually contradicted themselves by saying they understand that we shouldn't have that dependency, and they understand that countries should find a way to stop depending on that foreign aid to actually find a way to develop themselves. And that is the whole point of today's debate. We said that regret is being disappointed at what foreign aid is bringing. Foreign aid brought all that dependency, brought some of the government aid. Okay, the money was coming from the foreign countries, and then it started in the government, and then wasn't getting down clearly, as my second speaker talked about. They talked about the money that the US was giving. They said that it was 0.7% of their gross income, and that shows us how little it is, that it's that buck money that they're like, let's just give these black people to actually for them to find a way to save themselves. And another thing is the loans and the aid. Foreign aid came as a way to help us develop. It didn't come as, you know what, we're going to give you 20 million and make sure you pay it back, because they have taken over so many countries. They have taken over the ports. They have taken over airports and everything. But that ended up actually making some of the countries bankrupt. At some point, Sri Lanka became bankrupt. I think it's bankrupt right now. And another thing was the AU. The China built the AU headquarters and bugged them so that they can get information from that headquarters back to China. Some of their, they put bugs in their servers so that they could get all the information that they're putting within their servers. They bugged the walls of the AU headquarters. And then what you talked about, the guinea worms. There was a program in Egypt for eradicating a disease that was called schistosomiasis. Yeah, it was a disease that caused bloody urine and bloody stools. And at some point, what the Chinese or the foreign aid came up with is giving a mass drugs to the whole country and expecting those drugs to actually cure them. What came up was an increase in the rate of hepatitis C within the country, and that ended up actually making the situation worse. Another thing is what my fellow speakers talked about. We were like, foreign aid has done good. Yes, it has done good, and it shouldn't stop. But thing is, we should learn to find a way to adapt ourselves without that foreign aid, so at some point, we can find a way to live without it, because it is temporary. It was a foundation. It was the way to start, but not a way to live for our whole lives. There's a quote that says, give a man a fish, and you feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish, and you'll feed him for a lifetime. Remember that when you give that person that fish, they will eat for that day, but for the rest of the lifetime, are you feeding them for the rest of the lifetime? Teaching them all the skills that they need to know, and not actually colonizing them and coming, and telling them that we need them long term, and all those dependency and corruption and all that famine keeps increasing regardless of all that help that is being given. Another thing that they talked about, my fellow speakers talked about, was capital flight. The countries, the way foreign aid is given to countries can be set in as a platform that comes from the highest floor going to the downer floor. As it goes down the floors, the people from the upper floors take what they need. So as the platform reaches the end of the floor, the poor people don't have what to take. So at some point, it favors the politicians and all those rich people in the government, and does not actually favor those who need it. Thank you.
That speaker, I have a question. So you talked about that you have to teach a man how to fish, not just giving them a fish for just one day. And then we talked about also the foreign aid that is provided in forms of technical know-how. Isn't that a form of teaching a man how to fish?
Yeah, but what is done here in Africa is the fact that, let's take an example of, let's say, China. China went in maybe Nigeria, built a railway, had all those workers as Chinese workers, and ended up having those Chinese, there were Chinese workers, all the instructions within the railway were in Chinese language. So it makes us have to learn the language to actually keep up with the changers, which means we're being somehow colonized, and we have to keep up with those colonizers to actually understand where they came to change. The fact is that we do not understand the fact that foreign aid ends up bringing more good than bad, which is our matrix of regret. The disadvantages outweigh the advantages, and the advantages are short-lived compared to the disadvantages.
What do you know about The program, sorry.
The Made in Rwanda programs
Yes.
was another way for us to stop depending on all those things that were coming from the Americans.
It was started by Rwanda, right?
It was started by Rwanda.
Thank you.
Let's now welcome the third speaker from the opposition side.
It is with great disappointment that I greet you all. My name is Yvonne, and I want us to first, the fact that we're using English to debate, and this debate, I want us to understand what the motion states. The motion is, this House regrets foreign aid to African countries. Dear judges and the audience, we're here to debate about, do we regret foreign aid to African countries? The proposition side is here debating about how they have little knowledge to use the foreign aid given. It's not about them regretting the foreign aid they're given. It's about regretting why they have little knowledge of using the foreign aid. Dear judges, if you know you can't do something for yourself, then you have to agree and accept to be given help. If there's a difference, they have to understand that the difference between foreign aid and colonization. They just told us that foreign aid is another form of colonization. Colonization is where a country rules you and you don't have control, you can't deny. And foreign aid here is you have a chance to deny it if you can help yourself, dear judges. They talked about countries receiving foreign aid and foreign aid not being effective. Dear judges, if I would like to inform you, according to the survey made by the University of Western Australia, countries that receive the largest amount of foreign aid also display the greatest amount of economic growth. Let's get an example of Ethiopia. As my speaker said, it receives the highest foreign aid and its poverty rate is 24%, dear judges. And let's look at the other countries. They still have a high poverty rate because they still don't have they still don't use the foreign aid as they're given. Dear judges, it's not about us denying the foreign aid. I like the fact that they said that foreign aid is a foundation. You cannot build a house without a good foundation. You receive the foundation, which is foreign aid, and then you're able to build whatever you want to build in your country, dear judges. They talked about that Africa needs to depend on their economy, dear judges. Let's look at Rwanda. Rwanda in March 2020, it stated that close to 60% of Rwanda's total public investment came from aid. And how do you depend on the money you don't have, dear judges? If 60% of your total investment comes from aid, then why do you want to depend on yourself? We have to put down the pride that we have and know that we need help and learn how to use the help we're given in a better way, dear judges. She said that they set boundaries of economic growth. And my second speaker told you a quote that's by Mahatma Gandhi, which said that it is health that is the real wealth, not gold and silver, dear judges. It's health that is the real wealth. That's the real wealth. We have to talk about our health too, because it matters. And the foreign aid is helping us with our health as much as it is concerned. They talked about the COVID-19 and how the doses that were donated to our countries have helped us to reduce the cases of COVID-19, hence our health better, and then we can have the wealth we need, dear judges. They also talked about Somalia, that it doesn't get the struggle they don't understand the struggle to get the money. Dear judges, if you understand, it takes mind, it takes knowledge for you to understand that you're given help and you need to use it in a polite way. Here we're not debating about foreign aid being an issue. They have accepted that foreign aid is needed since they say this is a foundation. And now they're debating about the foreign aid, the African countries not having the knowledge to use the foreign aid they're given. So which means they don't regret the foreign aid. They regret how the foreign aid is used in African countries. Dear judges, it means they don't regret the foreign aid. So they don't regret the foreign aid. The issue is how they use, which means they're on our side because they do not regret the foreign aid, dear judges. We've seen the impact of foreign aid given since our health is improved. We also have, they said that African countries need to learn to adopt the foreign aid so they can live without it. And we also said it is fine, foreign aid is good, but we have to know that it is a foundation. We don't regret our foundation since we depend more on it. Thank you.
My question is, you say that you can't build a house without a good foundation. Let me ask you a question. If you have a house, you hired workers to build that house. When the house is finally built, will you still have your workers in the house, or will you let them go and have them do other jobs?
Excuse me, dear speaker. Your workers are not your foundation. Your foundation is the one they have built. And you accept that,
Exactly,
right?
they have built it.
You talked about health is wealth. I have this phrase: sending a man to school and giving him education and providing medical care does not create wealth for him. Do you agree with that? Sending a man to school does not create wealth for him. Do you agree with that? You talked about how to use foreign aid. You talked about how we are staying on the point of what is the case here is how to use that foreign aid. What if that foreign aid was not there in the first place? Do you think we'd be talking about how to use that foreign aid?
If the foreign aid was not there, then we wouldn't even be here. So if I gave an example of Rwanda, 60% of its total investment being from aid, then how do you say you want to depend on something you don't have, dear judges? I also want to tell you this. We didn't say that health. What we meant with health is the real wealth. Is when you're fine, then you're able to work. You're not going to tell the patient as King Faisal to come and work with
last question: do you think Africa is rich or poor?
It's rich, and being rich does not remove the fact that you need help. Thank you.
Mother Mary are saying the Hey Marys and Riviera are definitely also praying to their God, and they are battling it for a spot at the semi-finals. Now, we'll give them 1 minute to prepare for their reply speech, and they will be back to deliver it. But in the meantime, stay tuned. This is the iDebate TV Championship.
All right, the 2 minutes are up. Now it is time for the reply speeches. And just to remind you that it's about summarizing your arguments against the other side's arguments. And as for the reply speech, we're going to start with the opposition side.
As the motion of today was saying, this House regrets foreign aid to African countries. First of all, I want to pass through what we've talked about. Our side is saying that we don't regret because, first of all, foreign aid has helped Africa to reduce the poverty and also to improve on health, or maybe to support people in danger, war, and disaster, as I've talked about. And I want to I just want to remind you that the third speaker, accepted that Made in Rwanda is a program that was started by Rwanda to boost the domestic products of Rwanda. And that actually says that we have learned actually how to fish, as they said, right? So they're on our side because foreign aid has helped us to learn how to fish, and we actually learned how to fish. Let me talk about what they said, that the negative impacts outweigh the positive impacts, and the positive impacts are short-term. We proved that, as I explained, the breaking of the poverty cycle, and how some countries like Rwanda are trying to depend on themselves in one way or the other, that actually the positive impacts are long-term, and the negative impacts about taking resources, as they said, profit repatriation, it's just short-term because the moment that we're now able to sustain on ourselves, then we cut them off and then we go. Because as the third speaker explained, it's not colonization, we accept or refuse. Let's talk about Ethiopia as our case study. We said that Ethiopia receives more aid, and actually it's boosting economically. So, as they said, the economic aid, of course, economic aid is doing what it's supposed to do. And they're saying that it's free money. So if it's free money, although we also explained that can also be a loan, then if it's free money, what's the guarantee that also the money that is got from other sources, let's say taxes, is not misused? They're saying that the leaders have a problem, but they didn't prove that also money from other sources is not misused or corrupt. So the problem is with us. And as you said, the debate is about if we regret the foreign aid or how it's used. So please come to your side. Thank you.
And now it is time for the proposition side to make the reply speech.
Thank you so much. My name is Davin once again, and I'm from the proposition side, and I'm here to give the reply speech. Side opposition clearly said that all of us had what was going on throughout the debate made in Rwanda. That means side opposition was clearly finding alternatives to foreign aid. That means they clearly regret foreign aid and whatever comes with foreign aid. Somewhere in the debate, they talked about wanting to cut it off because they also realized they were leaning so much on the foreign aid. That means they also regret foreign aid and have seen its cons. Ladies and gentlemen, they talked about how it was just a foundation, but they did not regret. But we said it is a foundation, and we showed how we clearly regretted because we were depending on it. We had debts, we had huge debts, and the failed projects, and so on. They talked about how 60% of the Rwandan economy comes from foreign aid, and they kept on giving alternatives, which also again shows that if 60% is from the economic, if 60% of the Rwandan economy is from economic aid, that means that they were also finding ways on how Rwanda could lean off this foreign aid. Because if this 60% is cut off, Rwanda would have a lot to do. And we said colonization was what we could just term this as, but they took it like we had said. What is going on in Africa is colonization. Again, they kept on talking about humanitarian aid, and we as a proposition side showed that we cannot regret humanitarian aid because this had to do with saving lives. We cannot regret anything that has to do with saving our people's lives. We talked about how foreign aid is a long-term, how its negative impacts are long-term, and we clearly showed how it was a negative long-term impact. But then the side opposition didn't show how depending on foreign aid was a long-term because they were also looking for ways to lean off the foreign aid. So, ladies and gentlemen, opposition has clearly gone against themselves because they are finding alternatives and they also believe that they regret foreign aid. Thank you.
Now, should African countries rely on just their economy to support themselves, or should we continue having foreign aid? Well, we're about to find the answer to that question, but hey, it's only the judges that will help us to know which side really took this one home. So we can allow them to go outside as they decide who is taking this one home. So judges, feel free to take your time, and we'll be right back. But hey, stay tuned. You're watching the iDebate TV Championship, and we are securing the last place to the semi-finals of this championship. We have Mother Mary International School Complex and Riviera High School. The judges are back, and they have the verdict. Judge Joselito, did you come up to a conclusion with the beautiful ladies on your side?
Indeed, we have come to a conclusion.
Must have been a fun one, huh? All right, so what did you base on, the criteria?
Yeah, as you said, it was a battle of mind and about persuasion. And to see which side convinced us, we made the verdict based on, as the motion was saying, this House regrets foreign aids to African countries. So it was how was the foreign aid used, the benefits of it was a matter of weighing the advantages and disadvantages of foreign aids to African countries. So the proposition was to convince us that the disadvantages outweigh the advantages of foreign aids to African countries, while the opposition side had to do the opposite, of course, and say that the advantages are more than the disadvantages.
Judge Joselito did make it quite easy for anyone to understand. Now, I understand you have the results with you.
Yeah, we do.
Could you hand over to me? Written in very big letters, they have written the side that took home the debate. Now, I can tell that it was written by one of the ladies on the side. Now, for today, this House regrets foreign aid to African countries. The schools debating were Mother Mary International Complex and Riviera High School. The side that convinced the judges most and persuaded them to their side is... I'm taking my time. The proposition side, Mother Mary International Complex. According to them, we do regret foreign aid to African countries. Now, Mother Mary International Complex has also secured a spot in the semi-finals, and it's going to be a hot one. So don't you dare miss it out, because we will be there. My name is David. This was the iDebate TV Championship, and we'll see you in the semi-finals.